When everything stopped, I started this journey. I felt going up in a body, and I saw this white light up there, and I was being attracted to it. I was being suctioned. I was being attracted like with a magnet, going up and feeling no weight, no time, and everything was beautiful. Everything was the word to describe it better. It was full of love.
Mr. Gonzalez, about 50 years ago, on the 28th of February 1975, the worst disaster in British railway history occurred, the Moorgate tube crash. 43 people died and 74 were injured. You were sitting in the front coach, survived, and were rescued about 5 hours after the accident. During this time you had a near-death experience, a journey to heaven, then to hell and back, as you describe it. Before we come to that, please tell us how this terrible accident happened and how the rescue operations went.
Right, I was a student in London at the time. I was 21 years old, and on that particular Friday I had classes starting about 10:30 in the morning, but I decided to go earlier to go to the library and do some work. So I left my home where I was living and took the usual journey on the underground, and everything was normal until just before the final station, which was Moorgate. The train was going rather fast. The train shuddered, moved to the sides as we got into the station, and of course it didn't stop. It didn't attempt to stop, and it went right past the platform where some people were standing to take the train back because it was the final stop. And I remember I was sitting down, the train was full but not completely crowded. I was sitting down, as I said, the train was travelling in this direction to my left, and I was facing this lady sitting opposite me. I was reading a newspaper, and with the movement, my newspaper went down with my arms like this, and I saw this lady's face, and at that moment, the lights went out. There was this almighty crash sound, metal, glass, everything, and everything happened in the space of time that you breathe in before anybody could scream or say anything. In that time, everything was over. From
so there was no scream, nothing?
No scream. There was no time to do any movement or shout or say anything, because we were at the front of the train. At the end of the platform there was this sand bank, and there was an old-fashioned metal stop for the train, because nobody expected the train to go that fast. It was travelling at about 30 miles an hour, which is 50 kilometers an hour, and at that speed it hit the buffers, it went over this sandbank and travelled maybe 5 meters until it hit the concrete wall. So that time that was it. And when it hit the concrete wall, the first compartment was folded in three. It was reduced to 1/3 of the length. The second coach ran underneath the first one, and the third one crashed against the second, but from the fourth coach to the end, nothing. So when the rescuers got there, they saw, very strange, a very short train, there's only 3 compartments here. So maybe the front of the train has crashed. But then they realized there's no train with 3 coaches, all of them have 6 coaches. Where are the other 3? There was only space for 1 compartment, and if you've ever been on an underground train, you know that the tunnel is this big and the train is not that much smaller, so they were all compressed like this, particularly the first one.
And you were sitting in the first one?
In the first coach, I remember they had 3 sets of doors, and I was in the middle set, just after the door, the first seat. So there was this glass here and metal here, and when it crashed, everything stopped for me. Everything stopped for the lady sitting opposite me, because I believe she didn't survive. It was only after about 5 hours that I heard somebody shout, "Is there anybody else there?" And silence. I don't know where I was.
You didn't know that 5 hours had passed?
I only knew that later, because of the information I read when they started getting people out and when they got the last one out. I wasn't the last one out because there were a couple of people that were trapped, physically trapped. But I was the last one found alive. Now, to me, really, the way I see it is that officially there were 43 people dead, but I was probably number 44, because after that event, every time I have an ECG or electrocardiogram, the doctors told me, have you ever had a heart failure? And I said, no, but maybe there. Because when everything stopped, I started this journey. I felt going up in a body, and I saw this white light up there, and I was being attracted to it. I was being suctioned. I was being attracted like with a magnet, going up and feeling no weight, no time, and everything was beautiful. Everything was, the word to describe it better, it was full of love. There was the essence of love, and I was going up, and I could see underneath me. I saw a valley with a river, I saw a valley with trees and people down there, and I felt everything so marvelous, and I thought, I'd really like to see all this. I'd really like to tell everybody what I'm seeing. This is unbelievable. And to this day, I can describe everything that happened, and I feel it as it was yesterday, and it was real. More real than this.
Hyper-reality.
Hyper-reality, exactly, yes. And everything was just love. All the good feelings that you have down here in our day-to-day life, I felt all that.
Did you also have the feeling to be at home?
No, I was feeling relaxed. I was feeling in good humor. I was feeling in. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't see anybody this close. But I was going closer and closer to this white. It was like everything was covered with snow, but without the disadvantage of when you see the snow, you see the reflexes of the light. This was white, which was really warm and attractive and pleasant. And I wanted to continue there, but I also wanted to come back and tell everybody about this. The next thing is, without my knowledge, without my consent, I was being pushed down, and I was being not suctioned, not attracted, but pushed down into a very dark area where I could hear screams, I could smell if anything like sulfur, bad. I felt rejection. It's like when you take a kid to the zoo and he sees the lion and the lion goes, "Arr!" and the child goes, "I don't want to go there." I was feeling like that. I didn't want to be pushed. So in a way,
this was a kind of a hellish experience.
It was hellish in the sense that it was dark, hot, screams, really bad, terrible. I couldn't see anything, and it was not what was happening on the tunnel, because everyone was either dead or had been rescued, except for these two people that were trapped. And there was no way that I could physically be listening to people screaming there, because they had already gone. So when I heard the shout, "Is there anybody else there?" I don't know why, but I shouted back, "Yes, I'm here." The man shouted back, "Can you move?" And I then realized that I was face down against the floor. I tried to lift myself like this, and I couldn't because of pain. And I said, "No, I can't move." And he said, "Don't worry, cover your face and we'll get you out." I was hovering between consciousness and not consciousness, and I remember this guy being next to me and injecting me something in my hand, and he said, "Grab the back of my neck," like so, and he pulled me, and he passed me on to somebody else, and eventually he passed me on to a third man, and after that I don't remember until I was being put into an ambulance on a stretcher, and I wanted to look around, and the rescuers were telling me, "Just stay still," and I said, "Yeah, but I've never been on an ambulance. I want to see what it is like." So, 21-year-old student, and I was excited, but that was it. I really wasn't conscious until the following morning. That was Friday, 8 something in the morning when the accident happened. It was Saturday morning when I woke up, really. And I was in intensive care in a hospital there in London near the Moorgate, St Bartholomew's, and I had a nurse standing next to me, and when she saw that I was opening my eyes, she said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I don't know, where am I?" And she said, "In intensive care in the hospital. Were you in the train?" And I said, "Train? What train?" Train, I thought overground train. I'd never imagined that I was underground. I said, "Train?" "Yes," she said. She passed me a newspaper, and there was images of this accident, this train crash, and my name was on the front page of the newspaper.
So you had lost your memory?
Yes. I said to her, "What happened? Have I robbed a bank?" Slowly she explained, and I didn't realize that I didn't remember. I had been on an underground train. I didn't remember anything. And gradually it started coming back.
And also the memory of your near-death experience.
Correct. Correct.
Let's go back to this hellish experience. There are many reports of people who are in intensive care, in a coma, who had hellish experiences because there was some kind of connection to their physical body. So for you, was there a quality difference between the hyperreality in your heaven experiences and that one which were hellish?
To me, it was all part of the same thing. It was the same continuous experience. I didn't have a break. I didn't go out of the experience and back into the experience. No, it was all continuous. But there was no logical connection. 1 minute I was going up and I was seeing all these beautiful things with all the exciting, beautiful sensations, and next moment I was experiencing this darkness and being pushed down, and I didn't want to go there, and the screams and the smell and the horrible. I just don't recommend it to anybody. So in the hospital they told me that physically I had fractured my hip. There's a bone where the leg finishes, and this round bone, it was shattered in 1,000 pieces like you break a glass, and there were many, many small pieces, but everything was in its place. So they took me to the hospital and they did an operation which was through my leg. This took steel rod, like a skewer. You know, when you have a barbecue and you go like this, I was feeling my bone there being perforated with this steel rod, because they had no anesthetic because of the blow on my head. They didn't know what had happened, so they couldn't put me to sleep. And because I also had a fractured sternum, vertically like this, I couldn't lie down. So I was sitting down, or kind of sitting down on the bed, and a nurse standing next to me, she gave me her hand, poor girl, because I started squeezing her hand, and days later she told me, "You almost broke my hand," because it was painful, to say the least. I couldn't get out of bed for 45 days. I was lying down with this rod, weights, pulling my leg away from my hip. And that healed, but they told me that maybe in 20 years' time I would need a hip replacement. Thank God it's not happened. It's not troubled me anymore. Everything healed perfect. I'm very, very thankful for the rescuers and all the medical teams that were involved.
And during this time you also fully remembered your near-death experience?
Yes, I remember everything that happened, but from day one, from the time of the nurse, the first nurse, that I started telling her that I had been through this, they all started saying, "Poor guy, he's gone nuts, he's gone mad."
In 1975, the term near-death experience was not really known, I think.
It was not known.
Were you able to categorize what you experienced, and could you talk to other people, to anyone, about what you experienced?
I did in the first few days, but when I saw everybody's face and their comments, I just shut up. For years I didn't talk to anybody about this, because I was tired of people thinking, poor guy, he's gone mad.
And when did this change?
Don't know specifically, but in time, perhaps when I started listening to other people having similar experiences, and then is when I started talking and eventually wrote a book with not just this, but many other experiences before and after.
What was your goal with this book? Why did you write it?
Friends that were listening by this time to my narrative and the experience, they said, well, all this sounds very interesting, why don't you write a book? And again, for years they were telling me this, until eventually I said, okay, I will write a book. With experiences that all tie up to having a very unusual life.
Spiritual experiences?
Both spiritual and physical. I read somewhere that a lot of the people that have near-death experiences, and by this time that term was known, have very strange lives for the rest of their life. Good things, bad things, and you go up and down like a yo-yo or a rubber ball. And this is exactly what happened to me all the way to today. So I wrote the book and didn't start with just this event. I started, in fact, from the age of about 10, when I was in South America in a dried up river, and you know, there are mountains in South America like there are in Austria and Switzerland, and but the some of the rivers only run for a month, maybe a few weeks, and maybe years that are dry. And I was with another friend who was about 10, also a neighbor, in this beach place, and we decided to go fishing. And in the mouth of this river, where it was next to the sea, there were really big rocks, and we used that place several times before to sit or stand on the rocks and go do line fishing from there, and it was good. But this particular morning we were fishing for maybe over an hour and there was nothing. So we thought, okay, let's go. So we decided to pack up and started walking back. I think about 5 minutes later, we were only about 200 meters away. We had banging, and we thought, this is very strange. And the river had decided to come down with rocks and water and mud, and the rocks that we were standing on had gone.
So there was a heavy rainfall somewhere?
Up in the mountains.
Up in the mountains.
And suddenly these things come down, and the rocks that we were standing on had gone in a space of 5 minutes. So we thought, we better not tell anybody. That was the first one. But then there was a second one, maybe 6 years later. I was with a group of friends, this time maybe 20 of us. We were on a valley, and the valleys in South America, they're very narrow, and everyone was here by the river, and it was 1, 2, 3 of us. We decided to do a little bit more exercise and climb the mountain. Just decided to go up. We don't do this professionally, we don't do this regularly, but we were feeling energetic and we decided to walk up. And when we were at a reasonable height, we heard this thing like an explosion. So we looked down, nothing. We looked up the valley, nothing. Down the valley, nothing. Across the valley, nothing. Looked up, and there were rocks coming down from the top of the mountain. There had been an explosion tunneling explosion at the top of the mountain or higher up, and all these rocks were coming down. Some small, some big, this big, and we could see them bouncing, and we did a quick mental calculation, and we thought, okay, there's no time to go down, there's no time to go left, there's no time to go right. What do? We looked at a huge rock that was standing a couple of meters away, and we said, let's seek refuge behind that rock. And one of them lay flat, the other one on top. I was third one on top of that. I could see the rocks bouncing until I saw one as big as the one we were, and it was bouncing like this, and I saw it coming straight towards us. And I told them the bad news. I said, I think this one will hit us. Fortunately, I was wrong, and I could see that huge rock going like 40 centimeters above my head, and it bounced. Werner, there was 3 days after that none of us could speak. We were so shocked, so paralyzed, we couldn't talk.
Where was this exactly? In Brazil? Or?
That was in Peru.
Peru, okay.
Yeah, and like the previous one, we said nothing to anybody. Just decided to keep quiet, otherwise we would not get permission to go anywhere.
So, looking back to your experiences, did you have any premonitions before one of these accidents?
No, no premonitions before any one of these. But after the Moorgate crash, the experiences started multiplying a lot more and very frequent.
What kind of experiences?
For example, I'll give you a few examples. Rubber ball, yes. I'll give you a few examples. I was having lunch with, this is in Brazil, lunch with a girl, and suddenly I said to her, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I'm not crying." But her phone rang, and she excused herself and went, and it was her mother. 2 minutes later she comes back crying. And she said to me, "How did you know I was going to be crying?" I didn't know. I just said it. Or it's happened a few times as well in Brazil, in England, different places, saying, "Why don't you answer your phone to somebody?" And but my phone's not ringing. And then it starts ringing. I've been walking in the street with my wife and gone past a friend's house, and my wife said, "I wonder whether they'll be in." And I said, "No, they're not at home, they are in Windsor." I don't know why I said it, but later we found out that yes, they were at Windsor.
And for you there's a connection to your near-death experience?
Yes, because before that, before Moorgate, I didn't experience these things, and from then on, yes.
To what extent have you recovered physically from your injuries? How has your health been until now?
Irregular, shall we say. Good, bad, worse, very good, extremes. Extremes without explanation. Again, I'll give you one example. What happened 15, 20 years after Moorgate, that I was in Brazil, in a city called Florianopolis. And I had been driving to visit a factory maybe 2 hours away. And before I got to the other town, I had this pain in my calf, in the back of my leg. And I thought, that'll go away. So when I got to the other town, I went straight to a pharmacy. I said, "I want some tablets for pain in my leg." They gave me a few things, and I went to sleep. And in the middle of the night, I woke up again and I could hardly move. I could hardly get dressed. And I thought, okay, I'll cancel everything. Got in the car. Fortunately, it was on the left foot, and I could use my right foot. And I accelerated the car, and I thought, I'm not stopping until I get back to Florianópolis, and I'm going straight to the hospital. I did just that. I abandoned the car, went into the hospital, and they said, you've got a blood clot in your leg, but you've got another blood clot on your other leg.
A DVT or something?
Yes, yeah. DVT. So they kept me in the hospital. I had to communicate with the travel insurance people that were based in Denmark to get permission to go into the hospital and get everything sorted. And the insurance company got hold of my wife in England, and they flew her to Florianópolis, and she was coming every day. And one morning we spoke on the telephone, and she said, okay, I'm leaving now, in 10 minutes I'll be there. When she got to the hospital, she went straight to the room, but the room was locked. So she said to the nurse, why is the room locked? And they told her, come, please, sit down. And she said, but where is he? We're doing everything possible to save him, because now he's got a blood clot in his lung. And of course I had difficulty breathing. And fortunately, I was already in the hospital, and it was about 2 minutes from the room to intensive care. And yes, they were doing everything possible to save me, because it's not easy to survive these things. It's not easy to survive in a good state of health. People with this have then difficulty moving, speaking, etc. But I survived. We made new arrangements to fly back to England. We were ready to go. Unfortunately, I caught pneumonia. So back into the hospital, cancelled everything again, and eventually got better. Like now we were about 2.5 months since the first event there. But before getting there, when I was taken to intensive care, they explained to me what was happening and the likelihood of myself dying, and I started praying, because I knew that I was on my way up again. And I asked the boss, please don't take me now, because I have a mother who is, at the time she was 96, living on her own in Peru. She was from Chile, but she was in Peru. She had no relatives, no friends, because at 96 everyone that she knew had already died. And she depended only on me, who was taking care of the payment to the old people's home with nuns. And I said to the boss, please don't take me, I have to see her out. And 3 days later, I decided to telephone the old people's home, and I spoke with one of the nuns. I explained to her what was happening to me. And I asked, how is she? And she said, she's all right, in the sense that she's the same. She's not talking, she's got problems with this and that, and she's in bed. But there was something strange. 3 days ago, she had a visitor. A visitor, I thought, that's very strange. She doesn't know anybody. So, jokingly, I said to the to the nun, I know, it was her mother that went to see her. And she said, no, it was not her mother. In fact, there was a second nurse that was looking for a first nurse in the old people's home, and she thought, okay, the nurse must be with your mother. And she went into her room, and indeed she saw this lady dressed in white veil, but there was some hair coming out on the side, and she started approaching her to speak to her because she thought that was the nurse, until she realized that it was not a nurse. In fact, it was not a human person. And she got scared and ran away. But that was the time of the day that I had been asking the boss, please don't take me. So that kind of thing is also happening.
In 2024 you had a second near-death experience?
Yes, and this is because maybe as a consequence of the massive blow I had in my head at the time of the Moorgate tube crash, now the neurologists are studying other issues I have in my brain. They've discovered in 2024 a tumor in my brain here, and we don't know the exact cause of that tumor. We don't know what that tumor is causing, and the fact is that I have a lot of pain across my head, and started different kinds of treatment. But one morning I was at home with my wife, we were ready to have breakfast, and I said to her, listen, I'm not stable. I was grabbing the chair because I was falling, and it was very painful, and I said, please take me upstairs to my bed. And I was almost crawling up, leaning against the wall. She was helping me to go up, and I lied on my bed, and I was feeling sick. I was not being sick, just feeling, I was feeling that my head was all going. I started feeling I was going to faint. But suddenly I started again going up, and I saw the white light again, and I saw the clouds underneath me in white color as well. And I thought, I know this, I've been through this before. So I went straight to my boss and I said to him, I had this image in my head of my wife when we were in the kitchen to have breakfast, and she was in panic that I was going to die. And I said to the boss, sorry, I cannot go now. I cannot leave my wife alone, and can I please stay until after she goes? And within 20 minutes I was up on my feet again, almost as if nothing had happened. And about 7 or 10 days after the event, my wife was diagnosed for the 5th time with a cancer tumor. And I thought immediately, no, I think I've done a bad deal when I said to the boss, please take her first and then me, because it's not very common to have 5 cancers, and will she survive? In fact, she's still waiting for the surgery. There was one important thing. When I saw the white light and I was going up under the clouds, I heard several voices saying, Javier, we've been telling you, it's time to go. You have to come with us. So very quickly I jumped to this conclusion, no, I cannot go. That was a short experience and wasn't a complete one, because it was only a few minutes and there was no explanation. Went back to the doctor, reported everything, and they're really used to seeing me like that. And in one of the stories, the one that happened in Brazil with the DVT and the clot in the lung and the pneumonia, when eventually got back to England and reported back to the doctors there, they said, okay, all this looks very serious, and we respect our colleagues in Brazil, the results here, the images and everything, but we have to conduct our own tests. Again, all the scans and all the tests done in England. And the doctor in charge said, I have to believe everything that they wrote in Brazil. It's documented here. But now you're okay. And it's only less than 2 months. So this is unusual. But there's one thing that my colleagues in Brazil missed out. You've got a cancer tumor in the pancreas. And we thought, what? Yes, here is the image, and they explained it was a similar situation to Steve Jobs from Apple. He also had tumor in the pancreas of the same kind, almost the same position as mine. And we thought, oh no, I don't have a fraction of the money that he had. And he ended up moving up there. I don't particularly want to go there now. And I started treatment in England. And this was 2013, and I'm still here.
What kind of treatment did you start? What was it exactly?
At the time it was experimental treatment. First of all, I had these anticoagulants, which was a new medication at the time, and I continue that today because of the blood clots, and even up to today there is no antidote for that. Which means that I have to be very careful, for example, not to fall, not to bang my head, because if I start bleeding, there's no way of stopping it. I would just bleed to death. I'm very conscious about that. And okay, for the pancreatic tumor, they started with some injections to try and freeze the pancreas, freeze the growth of the tumor, and they passed me on to the surgeon, and he said, I don't recommend you surgery because of the situation where it is, because of your structure and everything. If I did go to take away this tumor in your pancreas, I would have to remove your part of your liver, your spleen. I have to remove that. I have to do this and that. And the most likely thing that will happen is that you will die during the operation. And if you survive, your quality of life will be so poor that you wouldn't want to be alive. As I said, maybe a couple of years apart, saw him again, and he said the same thing. No surgery for you.
And this problem is still there?
Still there. The tumor is still there, has not grown, thank God. Still gives me pain, it still gives me issues in the system, and digestion, and pain, and it's expanded. I've got another tumor in the adrenal gland. I've got the tumor here, but I'm not in a terminal situation. Every time it's just more and more medication, more and more care. But the point is that it continues to go up and down.
You talked about the boss. Yeah. Have the near-death experiences or your experiences in general changed your religiosity?
Yes, in the first 5 years at least after the Moorgate tube crash, I went away from religion because not that I was abandoned, but I had not enough life experience. I was too young and didn't appreciate what was happening. Later on, I started assimilating what was happening, and some of the things were not due to doctors or medication. It was due to some other power. And with the help of my wife, I started understanding issues. She has had some strong experiences, 5 cancers. She lost her dad when we were traveling from South America back to London via the US. We knew that he died. Her dad was Swiss. He was almost 90, and he had a very powerful mind. And out of all the children that he had, my wife was the closest to him. And jokingly, when we were saying goodbye to him, jokingly she said, "Daddy, Daddy, once you are dead and you go to heaven, will you send me a signal that you're there?" He laughed, ha ha ha. "Yes, I will phone you." So we continued that journey. We got to London in the morning, a flight that was overnight, and went home and got the evening and went straight to bed. And about 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. And in those days it was not handy mobile, it was a physical phone which was in the other room. So I got up, went to answer the phone. "Hello?" Nobody. "Hello?" Nobody. Hung up, went back to bed, and my wife said, "Who was it?" "Your dad."
Very special coincidence.
If it was really him, he has to call again, she said. The following night, about the same time, phone rang again. And okay, nobody knew exactly our movements, that we had been traveling, and so nobody knew that, and nobody would call at 1, 2 a.m. But the phone rang the second day. I went to answer, nothing, and eventually went back to bed. And who was it? Your dad again. So it's true. In England, you have this system that when you have a telephone call that you miss, or you want to know who made the call, you dial, I think it's 1522, and there is a recording that tells you, at this time you had this telephone call from this number. So on the 2 days, I phoned that number, and I had this recording. You had a telephone call this time from number unknown. The 2 times. So that was it.
Today, are you afraid of death?
No, no, no. Today, and from the time of the experience at Moorgate, no fear of death. Before then, yes. I was worried about the rocks coming down on that avalanche, but from then on, no. No, because, and I've thought about these things, I came to the conclusion that to me, death or being dead is just another state of being. Like I could be asleep, as a state, or I could be awake, and I could be dead. So in the near-death experience, I was in the status of being dead. I've also thought, okay, this is against the natural conversation. We talk, and maybe you have children, and your boy was born on this date, and eventually he dies on this date, and this person existed from here to there. To me, it's not like that. I argue that you're not born on your birth date, because before that you exist in your mother's womb. So one thing is your birth date, but you exist from before that date. And in this context, because of this experience, I've also realized, okay, you die here, your body dies here, but then your soul continues. And this is what I think happened, that my soul was released and had the near-death experiences, which gives continuity to life.
I think this is a perfect closing statement. Thank you very much for sharing your remarkable experiences. All the best to you and your wife, and thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, and all the best to you as well, and hope this is useful to somebody at least.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.